Recently, the Saskatchewan population dropped for the first time in 14 years. It dropped by less than 3,000 as the Canadian population only grew by about 25,000 in the spring of this year. This became a big political issue because in Saskatchewan, under the NDP era, there was a long stagnation of population in the province. And when the Sask party took power, and even in the months before it took power, a boom began to hit. And through that boom, there's been population growth and economic growth. And because of COVID, of course, it dropped off. So I talked to my old history professor, Dr. James Pitsula, to do an article about this for the Epoch Times. And in doing so, I found out about a policy whereby the West, well, you could maybe say they were oppressed in favor of Eastern interests, and how that sounds a lot like today.
The other thing that makes Saskatchewan vulnerable is some of the main levers of the economy are in Ottawa, not in Saskatchewan. For example, one of the big complaints in Saskatchewan from the earliest days of settlement was the national tariff policy, which was geared to developing industry in central Canada. And that's something John A. Macdonald put in, and Laurier continued. So what the effect of that was is that tariffs went up on manufacturing goods because they wanted to protect the industrial interests of central Canada from competition from the United States and other countries. So the prices were raised artificially, and those were all inputs for Western farmers. So that you have your agricultural equipment, your building materials, everything was overpriced because of the intervention of the federal government to protect the industry of central Canada. And at the same time, there was no protection for agricultural products. The manufactured goods of Ontario and Quebec were sold to a large extent within Canada, but the wheat and the agricultural products were mainly exported. So there's no government protection for what Saskatchewan is producing, but there's government protection for what Ontario and Quebec are producing.
Right.
So that was a very big deal for many, many years. And now we have a government in Ottawa that is very hostile to oil and gas and fossil fuel. And that puts a damper on Saskatchewan and Alberta and BC because the government is very clear that it wants to phase out fossil fuel and carbon. So that has been very negative for Saskatchewan, Alberta, and the energy sector in general.